Okay. The fact that they have no legal status. Okay, I wanted to be sure that I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. So they have no legal status. And having no legal status means that in law, the sole proprietor and the business entity, they are seen as one. Are you with me? Because they don't have any legal status, so the sole proprietor is not seen as a separate or distinct body from the business. The sole proprietor and the business are seen as one and of the same. So the sole proprietorship business, in this case, cannot contract in the business name because the business itself has nothing like legal entity which mandates it to enter into contract in its own name. Meaning that it is the owner who can enter into contract in his own name because the owner is recognized in law as the sole owner of the business, and the owner and the business entity are seen as one. So whatever the owner does, even in the name of the business, he cannot exonerate himself from liability at the end of the day. When there's something wrong, he cannot say that this one, I acted in the name of my business. He can't say that because as an enterprise or as a sole proprietorship business, you have no legal status. Now, there's this case called Barclays Bank versus Latte. Barclays Bank versus Latte. I believe that we still remember the that one of the sources of law has to do with the court of competent jurisdiction, their judgments or rulings that they come up with. They become part of the law and they become the principle that other similar or other lower courts also look on in coming up with similar cases decisions. So if you look at the case of Barclays Bank versus Latte, I'd like to read this case to you because we'll be making reference to it as I move along. Now, I'll give you some facts of the case and the court holdings on the case. Now, if you see L in the case, it is referring to Latte. Latte, that is the name of the defendant. Barclays Bank happens to be the plaintiff. I told you this when we looked at business law. I hope you still remember. If you see a case citation like this, the first name happens to be the plaintiff's name. The plaintiff is the one who has taken the matter to court. The second name has to be the defendant's name. The defendant happens to be the one who has been sued. And I told you the year in bracket means the year in which the court came out with its decision or ruling, final ruling on the matter. So in the case of Barclays Bank versus Latte, this case was decided upon in 1978. Brief facts of the case. Latte, or you can say Mr. Latte, during his lifetime, registered the name of his business under the Registration of Business Names Act 1962 Act 151. Registration of Business Names Act, you see that as the main law which regulates how business names are registered or how some of the process to follow in registering businesses. So we shall see that very soon. So Mr. Latte during his lifetime registered the name of his business under the Registration of Business Name Act 1962 Act 151 as SCAP in quote. For the purposes of his business, he took a loan from the plaintiff. The plaintiff is Barclays Bank. He took a loan from the plaintiff to whom he mortgaged inter alia. When we say he mortgaged in law means that he it's like, using a personal property to serve as a security for a credit facility. So if you are going for a loan and then you use your house as the security for the loan.
Is it the same as collateral?
Yeah, it's the same as collateral. But the rightful word we use, I mean, the collateral happens to be the term used for it. But in law, we say that you have mortgaged your house or your landed property.
Okay.
Or a financial security. Okay. And when you see inter in law means among other things. Among other things. So we are saying that he took a loan from the plaintiff to whom he mortgaged, among other things, that is inter alia, his landed property with buildings thereon as security for the loan. On the death of Mr. Lartey, his administrators, that is the defendants, I mean the people who acted as his administrators, who were his family members, herein floated a limited liability company called Start Limited. That is, upon Mr. Lartey's death, they changed or converted Mr. Lartey's sole proprietorship business into a limited liability company. It is allowed in law to change a business from one form to another. It is allowed that maybe you've registered a sole proprietorship business and then later on you make it a limited liability company. It is allowed. So they registered the business as a limited liability company to take over the assets and liabilities of the business. That is of the business of the sole proprietorship business, which they have converted now. So the plaintiff wrote to the defendants. The plaintiff, I told you, is Barclays Bank. The plaintiff wrote to the defendants, who happens to be Mr. Lartey's family, demanding repayment of the loan. You know, the loan he took. The bank wrote to them demanding for repayment. But then they failed to pay. That is Mr. Lartey's family members, the administrators, they failed to pay. So when they failed to repay, the plaintiff calls to be issued against them an originating sermon for an order for judicial sale of the mortgage property. Because they failed to pay, the plaintiff, which happens to be the bank, also exercised their right on the property that Mr. Lartey mortgaged. They exercise their right to sell the property to defray the debt. Now, in court, the counsel for the defendants, that is Mr. Lartey's family, raised a preliminary objection on the ground. That's before even the case, they began with the decision and everything. They began with the court proceedings and everything. The first objection that the defendants, you see, they try to, like they say, get the case thrown out of court. That's what Mr. Lartey's family members tried doing. So they raised a preliminary objection on the grounds that the action against the defendants was misconceived. They claim that, or they argue that Mr. Lartey's business registered as CAT became on registration an artificial legal entity with perpetual succession and a distinct personality from that of Mr. Lartey, and that it was wrong for the plaintiff to hold the defendants who were only liable for the personal death of Mr. Lartey, liable for the indebtedness of CAT. What they claimed in court was that they were trying to, tell the court that just so the court will throw the case out before they even start with the proceedings. They were trying to tell the court that the court should throw the case away because in the first place,
what is this?
Registered in the first place, please mute your microphone. Ernestina, mute your microphone. Victoria, mute your microphone. Ernestina, Victoria, mute your microphone for me. Mute the microphone.
Mine is breaking power.
Yes.
Mute your microphone. Okay. All right. Thank God. I thought we were offline. Thank God we didn't go offline.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm coming in. I just want to power. Now that there's light, I want to power my machine. It's almost going off. Initially, I was operating with no power. I told you campus light has been on and off this evening. Okay, now I have my computer powered. Let's continue. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so um, so like I said, they were trying to get a court through the case out. Barclays Bank's case they sent to court out by raising a preliminary objection that by Mr. Latte registering his enterprise when it was a sole proprietorship. They claim that when Mr. Latte registered his enterprise, by the consequence of the registration, Mr. Latte obtained a legal entity status. That is as the sole proprietorship business knows. They are claiming that the mere fact that Mr. Latte registered his business as CAT in those days, they are not talking about today when it has been converted. They are even talking about when Mr. Latte registered his business in those days as CAT. That is the sole proprietorship business. They claim that at that stage, Mr. Latte's business obtained a legal entity status. So by going in to guarantee for a loan, or sorry, going in for a loan in the name of his business card, and then he guaranteeing with his personal property did not make sense. They cannot hold Mr. Latte to the loan because he wasn't the one who contracted. It was the company which entered into the agreement for the loan. So they cannot come and hold them responsible and then take Mr. Latte's personal property. But look at what the court said. Held. The court said that a business name registered and the registration of business name as 1962 did not by the act of registration acquire any legal personality distinct from the person registering it. The court just corrected them, brought them back on track. The fact that Mr. Latte registered his business at that time as CAP under the business name registration of business name as did not, warrant or did not make Mr. Latte's enterprise, that is his business, obtain a legal entity status. So, if that is the case, then the only thing that Mr. Latte enjoyed by registering his business name was what we call the exclusive use of the right of the name that he registered. Let me quote what the court said specifically to you so that you get everything. And when I explain, you get a better understanding. It reads here that this is the judgment. A registration of business name merely protected the exclusive use and the right of the person registering the name. Consequently, the registered name card did not acquire any legal personality distinct from Mr. Latte, who carried on business under the name. So the court told the defendants that by Mr. Latte registering the business name did not acquire him any legal status which makes him distinct from the business. In the eyes of the law, he and the business are seen as one. So whether he used the business name to contract for the loan and he used the personal asset to mortgage for the loan, it doesn't matter. What matters is Mr. Latte and the business are one. So the loan that Mr. Latte went in for, the personal property he used to mortgage for the loan should be sold by the bank. it is in the right direction that the bank, exercise
Madam.
their right.
Hello.
Yes, I'm listening.
So did
Hello.
how did the family come in? Because the family has nothing to do with the business.
The line.
Yeah, I say, how did the family comes in? It has nothing to do with the business.
Yeah, the family, they are the administrators to Mr. Latte's
Please,
estate.
can you hear me? The line is bad.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
After his death.
Can you hear me now?
They are the administrators after his death.
Yeah, they are the
Yeah, I can hear
administrators to his estate. So after his death, they
you. Okay.
family members became the administrators of his estate. They took over his property, and the first thing they did was to convert the business that he registered as a sole proprietorship uh,
Okay.
as, as a company limited by shares. So they converted it from sole proprietorship business to a limited liability company. And then when it became a limited liability company,
Okay.
the bank too, they needed the money because the time that they gave Mr. Latte to repay had even expired and he had not done the repayment. So they went to the administrators because if somebody dies, the administrators are appointed to handle the estate. They are the people who, take charge in terms of whatever debt or whatever property the person left behind. So they went to them and then they told them that Mr. Latte took a loan and Mr. Latte is owing them. And they didn't pay with the reason that Mr. Latte, when he entered into the contract for the loan, it was not him. It was rather the business. And this business you are referring to somebody who in law is different from Mr. Latte. So you cannot hold Mr. Latte's personal property or you cannot, use that to offset the debt. Besides, Mr. Latte is even dead. His his business that he registered as CAV is even no longer in existence because the business has now been converted into a limited liability company. So they were trying to say that the bank has no case, but the court disagreed with them by saying that Mr. Latte and the business are one. So if he took a loan in the business name and used his personal property to mortgage for the loan, he and the business are one. Whatever he has belongs to the business because whatever the business has is for him. So that was the court's final ruling on the matter. Now, so that is in terms of legal status. We've seen that sole proprietorship does not have legal status. Then, in terms of ownership, it's very, very important, and this one you need to listen to it with keen, attention, because this is one thing that in Ghana most people are getting wrong. Now, when it comes to ownership of sole proprietorship business, in terms of ownership, right? A sole proprietorship business, just like the name says, can only be owned by one individual. One individual. Just one person can own a sole proprietorship business. Two people cannot own a sole proprietorship business. In most cases in Ghana, we realize that maybe a husband sets the wife up by, let's say, establishing, like the example I used in the lecture material, that the husband establishes a hairdressing salon for the wife, and then the husband says that the business is for both of them. So they call it they name the business under their maybe first name. So, like for instance, this business called Vicadi. It is from the joint name of a husband and a wife. The wife is called Victoria. The husband is called Edu. So Vic and Edu, which they have shortened as Vicado. Now, to the husband and the wife, they think that they are the sole owner. I mean, they are having dual ownership in the business called Vicado. When they are registering Vicado, the law will require the filling of some forms. The one who fills the forms with his or her name is legally recognized as the owner of the business. In sole proprietorship business, we don't have joint ownership. I mean, I can't say that I am going to form a sole proprietorship business which will be owned by my husband and myself. I mean, it is not allowed legally. So, in terms of ownership, it is only one person who is recognized as a legal owner of the business. Then we have in terms of formation. Now, in terms of formation, we are looking at how, a sole proprietorship business can be formed. Now, in terms of formation, a sole proprietorship business is the only business which does not require any formal, requirements of registration or incorporation before you can actually start the business. I told you from the onset that, in fact, the sole proprietorship business is the only business that you can actually start before you think about registration. So you can start operating your business and then later register the business. Now, if you read the registration of business name as 151, it provides for the registration of the name of a sole proprietorship business, but it states that the name or the registration of the sole proprietorship business is not something that, that's the name, business name registration is not something that is compulsory, especially where we have the name, the surname. You have to bear with me. I don't know what is happening this evening that it goes on and off like that. I don't know what is happening. Okay. So it's a very simple business to form, and like I was saying before, where the name that he's using for the business is the same as his name. Like for instance, I'm Deborah Adu-Twumwaah and I'm going to register a business as Deborah Adu-Twumwaah Enterprise. If that is the case, then the law does not require any business name registration from me, because the name I'll be putting my sole proprietorship business is the same as my name. One thing that, as we read from the case of, I think is it earlier part or in the case, we saw that when you register a business name, one advantage you enjoy is the fact that you get to have the exclusive right over the usage of the name. You have exclusive right over the name's usage. That is one advantage you enjoy. But under Act 151, if somebody under Act 151, for instance, if you are registering a business and the name of your business is the same as your surname and first name, then you don't need registration for that. You don't need registration for that. Now, another thing that is very, very important in terms of formation is that there are people who are, or the owner who is forming the business should be somebody who has obtained the legal age to contract. And under our laws, the legal age for the Contract Act is age 21. Age 21 years and above, which is quite distinct or quite different from that of the legal age when it comes to criminal proceedings. That is 18. But the legal age to contract in Ghana is to obtain the age of 21 years and above. So the owner who is registering the business should have obtained the legal age so that he won't have any difficulty. Now, we're also going to look at the terms of management. In terms of management. Now, in terms of management, we know that the sole proprietorship business management and control, everything is vested in one person. Everything is vested in the owner of the business. And whatever he says happens to be final. Like I told you before, he doesn't need anybody to consent to whatever decision he's taking. Everything that he does is his own boss. So if he thinks that today we should do things this way, people will have to go by it. Then else you should be willing to, lose your job or something. But in terms of management, there is no, separation of ownership and management of the business like we have in the other forms of business ownership. So in terms of management, the owner manages the affairs of the business. He does every management by himself. Then in terms of liability for debt of the business, this is also another characteristic. In terms of liability for the debt of the business, that's one too. What happens is when you talk about liability for the debt, then it means that it should, should the business incur any cost or any debt, then we are looking at who bears that debt. We are saying that here it is the sole proprietor who bears. The sole proprietor bears. Okay. The sole proprietor, bears all liability for debts of the business. So if the sole proprietor enter into contract and there's any misunderstanding or disagreement, whatever, then or there's any debt, then he will have to bear the debt because he doesn't have any legal him to, say that because of my legal status, so I am not going to pay back the debt. This one he will have to pay back because he is liable to all debts. Separation of business assets from the owner's assets. That's in terms of separation of business assets from the owner's assets too. The sole proprietorship business sees, in law, sole proprietorship business is seen as, and the owner, they are seen as one. So there's nothing like separation of business assets from the owner's assets. Whatever the business has is for the owner. Whatever the owner also has is for the business. So in law, there's no separation of, business assets from that of the owner. Then borrowing powers. For borrowing powers, the sole proprietorship business, I told you before, you can enter into contract, you need to obtain the legal age of 21 years and above. So if the sole proprietor, and even when you have the legal age, it doesn't warrant you to, contract. In terms of, for instance, fine, if you have a legal age, you can contract, all right, but it doesn't mean you can contract and exonerate yourself from liability in case there's any problem. When you do so, when you contract in the business name, even in the business name, which is not supposed to be done, it is still going to be the sole responsibility of the sole proprietor to bear whatever consequences come with it. Now, for borrowing rights, if you don't have the power to contract because you have no legal status, then you don't have any borrowing powers. You can only have borrowing powers when you can actually contract in your own name. So, in terms of borrowing powers, sole proprietorship businesses do not and I quote, do not have the borrowing powers. And if they borrow in the business name, then the particular institution they borrow from, they may be entering or signing their debt warrant, just like we saw in the case of back bank versus plastic. Please mute your microphone. Please mute your microphone.
Junior.
Okay. I've been just trying to mute people's microphones because they are disturbing. Now, in terms of taxation, sole proprietorship business or the sole proprietorship business itself does not pay tax. It is the owner who pays tax. The owner pays income tax because the owner is seen as, the business is seen as the owner's source of income. So if you earn an income, then at the end of, every tax period, you have to pay your taxation. But this does not apply to sole proprietorship business. They do not pay tax. It is the owners who pay tax, and they pay tax on whatever money they have been able to, gain at the end of the accounting period. They pay tax on their income, but the income that people, they pay tax on their income, but not the income of the sole proprietorship business. And besides, the owner and the sole proprietorship business, they are one. They are one. So if we allow taxes to be paid by the owner plus the business, then it will amount to double taxation. Double taxation. Okay. So these are some of the characteristics that distinguishes a sole proprietorship business from that of companies and partnerships. Now, I want us to look at the requirements for registration under Act 151. That is requirement for registration under Act 151, which is the Registration of Business Name Act. Now, if you look at the requirements of registration, if you go to Section 1 of this particular Act, it spells out clearly that the sole proprietorship business should register its name where the name is different from owner's surname or first name. So the law is even saying that as a sole proprietorship business, you can actually start, operation before you can register your business. Now, when a business is being registered, whether sole proprietorship or partnership or companies, these are the same procedures they follow, just that there may be, depending on whether it is a sole proprietorship or partnership, there may be some parts in the Act 151, which will be devoted to each one of them. But for now, in terms of the general requirements of registration, whether it is for companies or partnership or sole proprietorship, the Registrar General, should be furnished with what we call the statement in writing of a prescribed form, which contains details such as the business name, the general nature of the business, the principal place of the business, all other places at which the business is carried out. So it is required that when you are registering a business, you prepare yourself for all these information that will be required by the Registrar General. Now, aside that, it is important for, that is point E, it is important that where the registration is to be effected, where the registration to be effected is that of an individual, that is only a sole person who Sorry, sorry. I'm trying to get my internet cable so that it will remove from the place, because if it removes, then it means that the whole thing is going to go off again. All right, let's move on. So if you read point E, it is saying that where the registration to be effected is that of an individual. So if you look at the entire thing, it covers whether it is companies or it is partnership or it is sole proprietorship. But point E specifically is only about sole proprietorship business. So it says that where the registration to be effected is that of an individual, and his present first name and surname should be given out, his nationality, and if any nationality, and if that nationality is not the nationality of origin, his nationality of origin. So the first thing that the law requires of sole proprietorship, that's after complying with the first part we just read, is he should provide his first name and surname. If he's not a Ghanaian, for instance, he should tell us where he's coming from. Then he should tell us his usual residence and other business occupation. I mean, this one, he should give all this information to the registrar general. Then he should also tell us whether he is under the age of 21 years as at the time of the registration.